It's Friday, November 7th, 2025. Today's spotlight piece is the 2015 1-ounce silver Libertad. With gold and silver still in correction mode, we're going to take a look at a metric that's going to highlight why gold is not in a bubble, and also Michael Burry coming out of the woodwork with a post on X for the first time in a long time this week. Stay tuned.
Ladies and gentlemen, your host, Titty Hunter.
With gold and silver in a corrective mode since October 17th, a lot of folks, a lot of pundits coming out of the woodwork, posting on social media, gold and silver were bubbles. They were parabolic and, those bubbles are bursting. And so I wanted to share a metric that kind of highlights how gold, for example, is not a bubble. So let me share that metric here, what you're seeing on your screen now. Let's talk through this. So the metric I'm showcasing here is essentially the total gold ETF exposure dollar-wise as a percentage of the grand total global ETF assets. And we're comparing that for what it is today versus the late summer of 2011 when gold really had taken off. And at the time, they were also calling gold a bubble then. And so what we're looking at is I pulled that information from the various sources shown here and essentially gathered dollar-wise gold ETF assets. Back in 2011, you had about $135 billion worth, and then right now in 2025, you have $365 billion worth. So although and nominally the amount out there in gold ETFs is higher now, out of the total ETF assets, that's grown substantially higher. Back in 2011, total global ETF assets were $1.58 billion US dollars, and now currently in 2025 it is 18.8 thousand billion. So total global ETF assets have skyrocketed. So although gold ETF assets are higher today versus 2011, as a percentage of the total, it is substantially lower. So basically, to get us up to the exposure levels of 2011, gold ETF assets would have to go up more than 4 times. It's at 1.9% today versus 8.5% back in the 2011 gold top. Speaking of tops and bubbles, Michael Burry has come out of the woodwork, posting on X for the first time in a long time. He has a history of showing up on a Twitter, X, I still like calling it Twitter. He loves showing up. He'll post some tweets for a couple days, maybe a couple of weeks, and then what happens is he deletes all his content and then just vanishes. And then he comes out of the woodwork like he did this past week, and this was kind of the first post he put up saying, sometimes we see bubbles, sometimes there's something to do about it, sometimes the only winning move is not to play. What was interesting was that this was the initial tweet he put out there, and then there was kind of a bit of a lag where then, I think like a day later, he shared that he was short NVDA and PLTR for a very sizable high concentration of his portfolio, and it's a leveraged play via put options. So I have shared that I started to short NVIDIA with deep out of the money puts, leap puts, basically put options contracts that expire over 1 year out. And I mean, my exposure is nothing. It's not something where I want to make it like a meaningful play at it. It is just a small portion of my portfolio. It's speculative in nature. Right now, I'm up to 10 contracts, and I'll probably feel very comfortable going up to 20, 30 contracts of out of the money puts and see how that works out. And I'll tell you why I don't want a huge exposure to shorting AI. And I got to say, Michael Burry's got huge balls doing this, and I'll tell you why I think it's a little precarious. And so why I think it's quite speculative that, albeit that NVIDIA, other AI companies are in bubble territory, what I'm afraid of, and kind of OpenAI hinted at it, they actually they maneuvered themselves for a bailout essentially this week, discussing how they want government loan guarantees for their AI projects. And they actually backpedaled on it because people got up in arms about it. And I mean, I don't blame them. But that brings up essentially something that I've been afraid of in terms of bubbles we're now in like where we don't have a free market anymore. Like it's a managed illusion. It seems like every crash gets a bailout, every bubble just seems to get bigger, and the game just doesn't seem to reset. I don't know. And one could say, oh, it feels different now. The Fed's out of bullets. They printed, they bailed out, they papered over everything, and the cracks are still there. But see, what I'm afraid of is that maybe you get a little mini crash, but maybe they don't let the market crash nominally. So, meaning nominally is that once we adjust for inflation, the market will go down. But in the nominal terms and what you see in the dollars quoted every single day, that the number may not be going down because things are getting papered over. The game is just rigged to never lose. And then the real move that should happen in a free market doesn't happen. And so I'm really concerned about that. I wanted to share another post put on X. Zuby posted this. He said, endless money printing is the source of most of your economic woes. It's not billionaires, capitalism, or any particular race of people. Your pounds, dollars, euros, naira, and yen are devalued daily, and as long as the problem is misdiagnosed, it will continue forever. And so somebody's reply, and this alludes directly into what I'm concerned about. What it's showing here is the total government U.S. debt, and it's basically for the last 125 years, going to the year 1900, and it's highlighting that the first 39 presidents before President Reagan, they essentially, the total U.S. government debt was under $1 trillion, or that was the threshold that they're outlining there. And then since Reagan, things have gone parabolic. So my concern with, I do feel like AI is a bubble. It's overdone. It's overhyped. I work in machine learning AI, so I see firsthand all the hype. But I'm not willing to put meaningful amounts to short it like Michael Burry does. I mean, I think he's right. If it's a free market, it absolutely must correct. But if you have the government stepping in and just, I mean, we're going at about a clip of 8 trillion increase in the U.S. debt every 4 years. Trump's at the very least going to match that in his current term, or quite potentially exceeding it. Let's see what happens after the government shutdown. But I'm concerned that they're just going to paper over the losses for these AI. Everybody seems that they're too big to fail. Everything needs to be bailed out. And so they'll be papered over. Sure, the stocks will have some initial plunge, but they'll recover. And nominally, it'll look good. But the key is in real dollar terms, as you're basically debasing the currency by just issuing more and more debt, the value of those dollars are less and less. If you look at the big hyperinflations of like Argentina and other countries, during those hyperinflations, their stock markets were taken off. That was kind of the reservoir to at least mitigate a portion of the inflation. But it is the gold and the silver that ultimately trumps everything. Let's shift gears and talk Libertads. Last video, I talked about the fake 1991 Type 2 Libertad, and it's starting to show up here in the United States. I showed a eBay auction, showed the pictures of kind of what it looks like. And I mean, it was only a matter of time. These were being minted over in Mexico, and it was just a matter of time before they crossed the border and started showing up in the United States on Facebook groups and on eBay. And so I think everyone needs to be vigilant. And as I mentioned, you got to consider, should I buy a raw one or should I buy a graded one, and kind of weigh the positives and the negatives of it. I mean, I wish I could get one of these fakes, get a hold of it just to see firsthand what it looks like from all types of angles, how it feels and everything. But I mean, I'm not going to pay the prices of an authentic one to get my hands on one. And so now I'm on social media and I see, for example, in one of the Facebook groups, someone is selling one of these, and I start to get skeptical if things look funny. And I just wanted to give a shout out to one. There's many sellers out there in a lot of these groups that looking to sell Mexican numismatics like Libertads and other coins. And I want to give this guy a shout out because he does things right. Zabala Coins. He essentially had posted a 91 for sale, and it looked quite funny. And he's the type of person that does things right, and this is what you should look for in sellers, that if you reach out to them with a concern, some skepticism, an example here, this, I thought it was a 1991 fake Type 2. This guy provided additional photos. He went and shared a Dropbox link to a video over a minute long, looking at the coin on a video through every angle, both the reverse and the obverse. And I went and shared it with a couple of folks, one whom has touched one of these firsthand, and he kind of confirmed, yeah, it might have looked funny to you, but that's not the fake. It's legit. And so that's why I keep saying I would love to have one of these, actually own one of these. I'm not going to pay the going rates for them, but I would love to own one just to see what it looks like. And I have several of the real one, and I would love to just compare side by side and really have a better perception, a better feel for the real and the fake. But shout out to him because he does things right. He shared more pictures, he shares more videos. When somebody is not willing to share, when you're asking them for information, when you have concerns, you don't want to transact with those folks. Maybe some of them you can get references from, but there are a lot of quote unquote good sellers that folks will give them a reference, but they've been known to play games, and this person is not one of them. He's a straight shooter. Huge shout out to them. Let's talk about today's spotlight coin, the 2015 Silver Libertad. So in the last several videos, we looked at the 2012, the 2013, and those were hovering around the 750K or so mintage. And then the 2014 saw a steep drop to about 425,000 or so. And now for 2015, we're closer to $1 million. We are at 901,500 mintage on the 2015. So it is far from being on the scarce side. Scarce relative to American Silver Eagles, but not scarce relative to other year Libertads. And so looking at the graded populations on NGC's population report and PCGS's population report, we could see that sustained high number of graded coins at NGC. 2015 silver, we're here at 5,648. We got a whole lot of MS70s, over 1,000 of them at 1,073. And the grand majority are the MS69. So this continued trend I talked about, where the dealers began submitting a whole lot of Libertads to NGC and PCGS to start getting graded, that trend continues. And on the PCGS side, 2015, as I mentioned, there was a lag. In the last video, I mentioned there's a lag when PCGS got in on the game versus NGC, and it was 2015. This is the year really where PCGS stepped up and say, hey, don't leave us out. We'll grade a lot of Libertads as well. And they have a total graded population of 4,350. Top pop MS70 with 1,900 of those. Now let's take a look at sold comps for the 2015 Silver Libertad. Make sure you turn on your sold listings filter, sort by ended recently. And as we can see here, November 6th, we had a raw one go for $57.49. So as we just mentioned, at just over 900,000 mintage, it's not on the scarce side. So we should not be expecting high prices here. So that kind of aligns up. On November 5th, there's a PCGS MS70 sell for $109.50. This raises the question that I've always asked listeners to kind of ask themselves. What is the price going rate lately of these coins if I purchase them raw, and what is the price if I purchase one graded? And then you take into consideration, okay, and now how much does it cost if I wanted to grade it myself? I have to ship it out to the grading company, become a member, the grading fees, how much does that cost? If you're seeing a price, $57.49 for a raw versus $109 graded, a very common year, easy to get a whole lot of these, you start to say, maybe this one I want to grade myself, because the delta between the 109 and the 57 is huge. And this is not a scarce Libertad by any measure, as you saw in terms of mintage and the graded population. So I'm seeing graded go for 109. I would probably want to grade this one myself. As you see, another raw one on November 5th, $59.99. November 4th, $59.97. Those are fractionals. We have another MS70 PCGS November 3rd, sold for $149.99. I wouldn't say that's a smart choice to be buying a 2015 graded for that type of price when I think it's the better deal to grade it yourself. So that just kind of gives you an idea of what the prices are for the 2015.